I'd like to talk today about something that feels both radical and ancient at the same time. And that is the living, breathing topic of self-generated pleasure. Now, just to be clear, I'm not referring to pleasure that comes from another person, nor am I talking about pleasure that comes from our achievements and successes. And I'm also not talking about pleasure that comes from external stimulation or consumption or intensity, which, if I am being honest, I am all too familiar with. What I'm talking about is pleasure that arises from within your own body, from your own presence, from your own relationship with being alive, and from your own intimate relationship with divinity. Because most of us were never taught what pleasure actually is. What we were taught was how to chase pleasure, or we were taught how to purchase pleasure. We were taught how to perform for it, or how to prove ourselves for it, how to earn it, how to deserve it, how to justify it. But we were not taught how to generate it from the inside out. And because of that, so many of us spend our lives in a subtle form of hunger and deprivation. We are constantly reaching outward for something to make us feel more alive, more whole, more okay, more ourselves. And so we look for it in relationships, we look for it in our work, in sex, in social media, in success, in validation, novelty, in intensity, in alcohol, you name it. And yeah, sometimes those things feel good. They even feel beautiful, but they are not sustainable sources of pleasure. They are stimulants, not nourishment. And so in this episode, my intention is to get real and honest about my own personal journey with pleasure and the ways in which I thought I was living my most pleasurable life. But more recently, I am present to the ways in which I was actually chasing counterfeit pleasure myself. And so I'm going to share with you the ways in which I've been practicing accessing a much deeper, more authentic version of self-generated pleasure and how that has changed the manifestation game for me in enormous ways. So let's dive in. Becoming a co-creator with the creator is your birthright. Together, we'll journey into your deepest authenticity. Because the more you align with who you truly are, the more effortlessly you call in the life that you desire and deserve. And most importantly, the more you step into your soul's highest purpose. Welcome to the Manifestation Method podcast, your number one source for Kabbalistic manifestation. Here we combine the ancient wisdom of Kabbalah, modern psychology, and quantum physics to help you achieve real, tangible manifestation results with my proven Abra method. I'm Ayelet Polonsky, and I'm here to guide you on your journey of manifesting a life that is aligned, expansive, and deeply connected to your highest self through the sacred energetic mechanics of Kabbalistic manifestation. To learn how to use Kabbalistic manifestation to transform your life from the inside out, go to ayeletpolonsky.com or download the Manifestation Method app. Let's open the gates of manifestation together. From a psychological perspective, we live in what researchers describe as a dopamine-driven culture. Now, just to get clear before we dive in, right? Dopamine is the neurotransmitter of seeking. It is or gets activated by anticipation, by novelty, by reward and pursuit. And so it's what lights up when we scroll through social media, or when we shop, or when we chase, when we strive, when we want something and imagine getting it. So dopamine is not really the chemical of satisfaction. It is the chemical of desire. And this means that our entire culture is organized and conditioned around wanting, not around receiving. We are conditioned and organized around stimulation, but not around true fulfillment, right? We are conditioned and organized around arousal, not around true intimacy. And so over time, something very subtle happens in the nervous system, right? The more we live in these dopamine loops, the less sensitive we become to actual, real pleasure. So the system needs more stimulation to feel anything at all. More intensity, more novelty, more drama, more extremes. And this is why so many people feel restless, bored, or empty most of the time, even when their lives are objectively full. And so what we've done is we've mistaken arousal for aliveness. We've mistaken intensity for intimacy. And we've mistaken stimulation for satisfaction. But the truth is, real pleasure from a nervous system perspective lives in a completely different chemistry. It is associated with oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins. And these are the chemicals of safety, of connection, bonding, embodiment, presence, and belonging. And so real pleasure happens when the body feels safe enough to receive sensation without bracing itself, right? When the system is regulated enough to actually feel what is happening rather than reaching for what might happen next, which ultimately means that pleasure is not something you grab, it is something you allow. And this is why self-generated pleasure is so powerful, and it is something that I have been exploring and diving into more recently than not, right? Because real self-generated pleasure does not depend on anything outside of you. It really just arises when your body is present, relaxed, and open enough to feel itself being alive. And this brings me to another piece that feels really important to talk about. Because some people don't just chase pleasure. What they're doing is they're chasing stimulation, right? They need the movement in order to feel alive. They need excitement in order to feel something at all, right? They need the intensity, the novelty, the drama, the adventure, or the emotional charge in order to feel connected to themselves. And these are the people who are always looking for the next thing. The next trip, the next relationship, the next high, the next breakthrough, the next thrill, the next shopping spree. And on the surface, it can look like aliveness. It can look like passion and creativity and someone who is just in love with life. But very often underneath that pattern, there's something much more tender. There is a nervous system that does not feel safe in stillness. It is a system that learned somewhere early on that calm equals danger, or that quiet equals abandonment, or that slowing down means something bad is about to happen. And so the body becomes addicted to the movement, and not necessarily because it loves chaos, but because chaos feels familiar. And so for many people, especially those who grew up in unpredictable or emotionally intense or unstable environments, a chaotic nervous system actually feels safe. It feels like home. So there's a baseline level of activation that the body recognizes, right? It's kind of like this subtle underlying hum of alertness or a readiness for impact, or kind of like a subtle sense of bracing. And when that hum disappears, when things become too calm or too quiet or too steady, the system doesn't relax, but it panics, because tranquility can feel threatening to a system that was wired in survival. And because tranquility feels unfamiliar, and anything that's unfamiliar feels unsafe. Right? So instead of softening, the body reaches for stimulation, right? Not necessarily for pleasure, but for regulation, for proof of aliveness, for sensation that says, I'm here, I exist because I feel something. And this is why people feel bored in healthy relationships, right? Or they might feel restless in peaceful phases of life. Or maybe they feel anxious when things are going too well. And it's not because they actually want the chaos, but it's because their nervous system doesn't yet know how to metabolize safety. So it looks for intensity instead. And this is such an important reframe, right? Because needing constant stimulation is not a personality trait. It's not a flaw. It's not a sign of immaturity. It's simply a nervous system adaptation. It's a body that learned how to feel alive through activation rather than through presence. And so this is where self-generated pleasure becomes, in my opinion, revolutionary. Before we continue, I'd like to share something that I've personally been using in my own practice, especially during monthly ceremonies and gatherings. I've been integrating the Rainbow Chakra full-length mat from Healthy Line, and it's become a really supportive part of how I ground my nervous system and create intentional space. This mat combines far infrared heat, PEMF therapy, and chakra-aligned gemstones, which makes it incredibly powerful for slowing down, regulating, and reconnecting with the body. Each time I get on the mat, it works every time. I feel a deep sense of warmth and a settling. I don't feel stimulated. I don't feel like I have to force anything. It's just my system remembering how to soften. So I use it during meditation, breath work, and like I said, I have all my participants use it during monthly ceremonies, and I've gotten such amazing feedback. Everybody just loves laying on this mat. It's really the kind of experience that stays with you even after you get up off the mat. So if you're curious about it and you want to learn more about how it works and how I use it in my own personal practice, you can click the link in my show notes or visit the link in my bio. Because self-generated pleasure teaches the body a new language. It is a language of sensation without urgency, or of aliveness without threat. It is a language of experiencing pleasure without chasing, or having depth of life experience without the drama. And so it retrains the nervous system to feel that I am alive in stillness. I am real even when I'm not performing. And I am safe without the stimulation. And this really requires a profound rewiring from the inside out. Because when a body that is used to chaos learns how to rest inside presence, something almost miraculous happens, right? What happens is the need to run and go and chase dissolves, right? The craving for the next hit softens, and the hunger for intensity becomes quieter. And this is not because life then suddenly becomes dull, but rather because aliveness moves from the edges back into our center, into our solar plexus, into our power center. And it moves from what was once external back into the internal, right? And then suddenly stillness no longer feels like death, but rather it feels like home, right? And I only know this so deeply because I have had to live it myself. I have had to train over and over again my own nervous system to shift from finding safety in stimulation to finding safety in stillness. You know, I come from a system that was wired for movement and for intensity and for aliveness through activation. And, you know, I have often felt feeling through charge, external charge. And so slowing down didn't feel like pleasure to me at first. It was hard. It felt like emptiness and boredom and like something was missing. And so I've had to be in this portal of gently, lovingly re-educating my body to awaken God from the inside out, right? I had to teach it that it's safe first and foremost to be in my body. It's safe to stop performing. It's safe to trust that my presence is enough. right? And that it's safe not to chase and that it's safe not to be in motion. And now some of the deepest pleasure I experience lives in the simplest moments. It lives in the moments where I'm sitting in my backyard with a cup of tea in silence. It lives in the moments where I am lighting my incense or I am, sitting in front of my meditation center, my little mitbeach, my little altar, and I am activating divinity from the inside out. Right? No phone, no stimulation, no to-do list, just breath, just the birds, just looking outside my window and taking in the greenery of Mother Nature, of allowing the heat of the sunlight to warm my skin, right? Just that pure, unfiltered sensation of being alive. And my system is learning something new here. Right? It's learning that aliveness isn't in the intensity and that pleasure does not require a pursuit or a number of followers on Instagram or a paycheck or any of that. I get to feel deeply, richly, exquisitely alive simply by being here. And so here's where this becomes deeply spiritual. In Kabbalah, the entire reason for creation is pleasure. The Ari teaches that God created the world in order to bestow delight, right? Not in order to test us or to punish us or exhaust us, but in order to give us true pleasure. Not the kind of pleasure we usually think of, right? Again, I'm not talking about indulgence or consumption or ego gratification. I'm talking about divine pleasure, the pleasure of being in relationship with life itself. And in Kabbalah, this pleasure is called ta'anug, which means sacred delight. And the highest form of ta'anug is not external at all. It is the pleasure of the soul remembering its connection to source. It is the pleasure of union, of presence, of feeling God alive in your own being. And this really means that the deepest pleasure available to a human being is not something that you acquire. It is something that you remember, right? And this doesn't mean that you can't experience this deep level of pleasure with another person. You absolutely can, and it can be like amplified in that way through being in that coherence with another. But it does mean that the source of your pleasure does not live inside of the other. Right? And Judaism actually has a very sophisticated relationship with pleasure. It is not anti-pleasure at all. It is deeply pro-pleasure, right? But only when pleasure is rooted in awareness and sanctification. Shabbat is about pleasure. Food is about pleasure. Touch is about pleasure. Beauty is about pleasure, but always in a way that brings you more into yourself, not further away. And so something that I've been exploring lately is how to create ritual that awakens pleasure from the inside out, right? So the other day I consecrated a bath ritual and I took every color of flowers, red, orange, yellow, green, purple, blue. I took rosemary, I took other herbs and milk, and I filled my bathtub with all of these natural elements. And then as I sat in the bath, I felt beauty awakening from the inside out. I felt dense frequencies and energies release. I felt myself allowing myself and giving myself permission to fall back in love with me. Not because I'm making a bath for someone else and needed their approval or needed their, wow, Ayelet, you're so good at setting up spaces and rituals. No, I did it for me and for God. So hi, Ayelet here. I just wanted to pop in and say I am so excited to officially introduce the Manifestation Method portal, membership, and app. This is your home for all things Kabbalistic manifestation. You'll get access to my monthly live workshops, soul deep hypno activations and attunements, all of our manifestation courses, and our global community of manifestors. And the best part? It's just $26 a month. That's less than a latte a week. Come manifest alongside me and start creating the life you desire and deserve. head over to ayeletpolonsky.com to join us. Judaism does not say don't enjoy life. It says enjoy life with consciousness, because unconscious pleasure becomes addictive, but conscious pleasure becomes nourishment, right? Unconscious pleasure is short-lived. It leaves you hungry, while conscious pleasure leaves you full. Right. And this really brings me to one of the most beautiful teachings my shaman ever gave me. You know, he taught me that everything in life is alive, not metaphorically, but quite literally. Every object, from a pencil to a table to a chair, every plant, every room, every moment has spirit, and everything is in relationship with you at all times. So everything is participating in your experience of being alive. And via this awareness, he had me start doing something very simple but very radical. He has me speaking to life, right? So I say good morning to my bed when I wake up. I thank my plants for infusing my home with joy. I say hello to the birds and the squirrels outside my window. I greet the day. I say hello to the sun and the moon. I thank my kimono that I'm wearing, right? I greet my body. I greet the moment. And something subtle but profound started to shift in my nervous system as a result of this practice. What I started to find over days and weeks and months is that the world became animated again. Right? Nothing was flat, nothing, not even the pencil that I used to write with is flat anymore. Everything became animated again, and not in a psychedelic way, but in a relational way, right? Because I stopped moving through life as if it were an object, and I started meeting life as if it were alive. And then suddenly, simple things became pleasurable again, right? The feeling of the sunlight on my skin, even just the taste of tea or biting into a strawberry or a blueberry, right? The sounds of the bird, the texture of the fabric of my blanket, the feeling of my breath. Everything has spirit and everything is now animated, right? And so I was no longer rushing through any experience, but rather I was inhabiting it, like immersed in the experience. Everything carries frequency. So now listening to the sounds of birds chirping becomes like a frequency, energetic experience of being alive. And this awakened a whole new level of simple self-generated pleasure, right? The pleasure of being here, the pleasure of perceiving, the pleasure of relating to life as something that is alive and responsive rather than something that I need to like extract from, right? And then there's like the deepest level of self-generated pleasure that I have ever experienced. And when I first experienced this, it was like, whoa, this is what it's like to come home to my soul. And that is the pleasure of awakening God, divinity, source in my body. You know, and so this is something that I've been practicing really diligently over the last few weeks. I mean, I've been practicing it really for years, but like with a lot more presence and understanding these last few weeks. And so I sit in stillness and I bring my attention to my root chakra, right? The base of my body, the place of instinct and safety and life force. And I don't necessarily visualize anything. I don't force anything. I simply bring awareness to that part of my body and I begin to feel it. And I've discovered something really astonishing. And that's that there is a direct energetic link between the root and the heart. And so when I place awareness in my root, my heart comes online and warmth begins to spread and presence begins to deepen. And I can feel that excitement, that pleasure begin to pulse in my heart center. And from that place, love becomes an embodied experience. And sensation becomes sacred. And so what I'll then do is I'll let myself bask in this energy. I let it circulate throughout my body and I let it expand beyond me. And to be clear, this pleasure is not sexual, but yet it is deeply erotic. And again, not in a performative way, but in a devotional way. It feels like God making love to the body through presence. And this is real ta'anug, real pleasure. This is sacred delight This is self-generated pleasure at the level of the soul. And so what I'm realizing more and more is that self-generated pleasure is actually about falling back in love with yourself. So many of us chase pleasure either through, escaping or chasing, and we think it lives in the next experience or the next relationship or the next success, the next purchase. But for me, my counterfeit pleasure was spiritual, right? Because it had to do with my work, my service in the world. And what I was doing for so many years is I was convincing myself that my work, my service, my devotion to humanity was the deepest form of pleasure I could possibly experience. And while my work is deeply meaningful and is sacred and is rooted in my mission, and I am clear, I was missing myself in that equation in a deeper way, right? I was forgetting about my own body, about my own femininity, about my own sensuality, about my own need for me to be adored by me. And so now another thing I practice is called mirror work, right? So what I'll do is I'll wear something that makes me feel really beautiful and alive. I look into my own eyes, not necessarily my reflection, but into my pupils, like deep into my pupils. And I breathe deeply into my belly. And I slow down. And I let myself feel myself. And I let myself fall in love again. Again, not in a narcissistic way, but in a devotional way. Like I am made b'tselem Elokim. I am made in the image of God. I carry within me a God particle. Every single cell of my body is being infused and breathed life into by God in every single moment. How could I not witness myself as divinity in that way? And this is self-generated pleasure. And when your body learns how to generate pleasure and safety and aliveness from within, everything in your external world, including all of your manifestations, radically changes, right? Your relationships soften because you are no longer looking to be completed. Your work or service in the world feels lighter because you're no longer looking to fill a void. Your desire becomes cleaner because it is no longer rooted in lack. Right? Your presence deepens because you're no longer waiting for the next thing to arrive. And so you stop looking for life to make you feel whole, and you meet life as already fully whole and complete. And that to me is the deepest pleasure there is, and the deepest form of manifestation mastery that can exist on planet Earth. Right? And so maybe this is the real invitation, or rather initiation for you, for me, for humanity, right? Not to become more exciting, not to become more impressive, not to become more accomplished or extraordinary, but to become more present, to let your body remember that aliveness is here, that pleasure does not need to be earned, that you don't need to chase life in order to feel it, that you get to sit with yourself long enough that you begin to feel your own breath as intimacy, that you can feel the touch of your own skin against skin and let it create electricity from the inside out. What is it like to caress your own neck, to touch your own arm slowly, gently, with the intention of touching and loving up on yourself? What is it like to slow down enough to feel your own heartbeat as your source of connection, right? To discover that the deepest pleasure is not something you get from the world. It is something that the world is constantly offering you if you just sit back and are willing to receive it. And maybe the greatest love affair you will ever have is not with another person or another dream or with another version of yourself, but with the simple, sacred experience of being alive in your own body, right here, right now, exactly as you are. So I invite you or bless you to not try to become anything more exciting, but to become more present, to let your body remember that aliveness is already here and that pleasure does not need to be earned. I bless you to come to a place of embodying that you don't need to chase in order to feel, that you get to sit with yourself long enough that you begin to feel your own breath as intimacy. And I bless you to have the greatest love affair that you will ever have, and that is the one with God and with self. Thank you, thank you, thank you for being here with me in this quite vulnerable, quite honest, and quite true episode. If this resonated with you and is something that you feel can touch the lives of other people who are in go mode, chase mode, performance mode, and you really see the possibility in them of accessing their own divinity, their own deep-rooted self-generated pleasure, then the biggest compliment you can give me is to pay it forward and share this episode with them, or give this podcast a rating, comment below. I love more than anything to hear from my listeners how this episode resonated with you. But ultimately, I just thank you. I thank you for being here with me, for taking the time, and for allowing, please God, these words to awaken pleasure from the inside out in you. So much love. Here's to your rising. If you enjoyed this episode, let's keep the conversation going inside the Manifestation Method Portal app, your #1 destination for Kabbalistic manifestation. Inside, you'll unlock the secrets of manifestation through my proven Abra method, rooted in Kabbalah, psychology, and quantum physics, designed to help you manifest real, tangible results from the inside out. Join our global community of manifestors, explore our signature courses, monthly live manifestation workshops with me, Ayelet, and access our transformational hypno activations and attunements to rewire limiting beliefs and align with your soul's purpose. The app is available now on the Apple App Store and Google Play. To sign up, head over to ayeletpolonsky.com. Becoming a co-creator with the Creator is your birthright. Let's manifest the life you desire and deserve together.